Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Today is May 9th, 2023. This special meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now called to order. Ms. Vermillion, will you please call roll? Here.
Councilors Moop,
Here.
Verdict,
Here.
Raff, we have on Zoom. Afghan,
Here.
Corrigan, we have on Zoom. And Wendland.
Here. Thank you. We wanted to have this meeting just to see how many people we could fit in the new City Hall. Everyone now please stand, remove your hats, and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, folks, so the process here today is we are going to have a report from our team at the city, and following the report, questions from the council, and then we will hear an hour's worth of public comment. If you are here to provide public comment, we ask that you fill out a slip in the back and hand it either to Carrie here up front. We will sort through. We want to present a variety of perspectives and opinions within that hour period. So I want to start though here today by first of all thanking all of you for being here and for actively participating in this process. You know, our time, all of us as residents, is limited, and we know that you all live busy lives, and there are many important priorities that the team at the city is working on daily. We do not direct work without serious consideration for all perspectives and without weighing first the community interests. So we're here today as we work to be responsive to both the recreational needs of the community as well as the right of our neighborhoods to have a strong voice in regards to uses in parks in their neighborhood. As I've said before, we come together in Lake Oswego first as residents, and our decisions in regards to parks and other uses must work in harmony with the surrounding environment. And we know the idea of being here is not anyone's first choice. Being part of a community requires participation. So I just want to thank you all for lending your voice in a collaborative way and being here with patience and grace for one another. And we certainly respect each one of you, just as I know you all respect each other. And despite the fact that sometimes the community process is uncomfortable, contentious, and stressful. So a couple of points here just at the top. You know, naturally, many of us are problem solvers, and that's certainly true for the city. When we closed the courts at George Rogers, the resounding and forceful feedback we heard from users of those courts was to move as quickly as possible to relocate the use. While a task force was commissioned that suggested several options, all of the options were fraught and complicated. There was no single, simple, timely, or cheap solution. So while we know many in the Westlake neighborhood feel targeted as a racket court facility that by and large meets minimum distance standards, it was really the only solution we could seek out that was responsive to what we heard from the community. In directing this work, we're asking a question. We are seeking your feedback and engaging you in a process. Nothing about this is a predetermination. As leaders, we need to be able to ask these questions. We need to investigate options, and I know that can mean time and energy for all of you. So I want to thank you again in advance for being here now as we hear the results of that engagement and the studies that have been conducted. I also want to point out that we have a fire station that is adjacent to the courts, everyone knows. There is no one who is more concerned for the safety and well-being of our firefighters than us as city leaders and the city as an organization. These are our coworkers. Lake Oswego is not the type of organization with a closed door mentality. We are successful as a city in large part due to the open and collaborative environment we engender. Ideas are freely expressed and opinions issued without recourse. So I appreciate everyone's concern for our firefighters, our first responders, but please know that they are top of mind for us. We have been in close contact with both the management and the union, and that no one will represent their interests more wholeheartedly than the city council. So with that, let us hear together this information and decide how we will move forward as a community. I'm going to invite our parks team to come up. Director Anderholm, Ms. Haggart. I want to thank everyone too, while they're coming up, for submitting written comments. The council has received everyone's written comments, the emails that you have sent, the comments you submitted online. Those have been shared, posted in the record, and all read by the council. And we carry those comments in our minds as we're here today. Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Good afternoon.
This is my first time using the clicker, so hopefully this works. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Councilors. Since the January 17th council meeting, we've been working with the Planning Department and a team of sound engineers and traffic engineering consultants to study the feasibility of converting the 2 tennis courts at Westlake Park into 6 pickleball courts. We have also engaged Westlake Park's neighbors to gather their input on the project, and we are here today to give you an update on what we have learned so far. In case you need a little refresher, here on the screen is Westlake Park. It is located in northwest Lake Oswego, just under a mile from I-5 in the Westlake neighborhood. The park currently hosts a lot of what we would call active recreation uses. This includes 3 ball fields, 1 full-size soccer pitch, 2 practice-size soccer fields, a basketball court, 2 tennis courts, a covered picnic shelter, and a covered playground area. It has also got Fire Station 210, as the mayor mentioned, which is the city's busiest fire station, which is up there in the northeast corner. Here's my clicker. And there's also a concrete fire training tower located right here just east of the courts, and the courts are outlined in red here on the map. To determine whether this project would even be feasible from a land use standpoint, the first thing that we did is request a pre-application conference to discuss with planning the land use process and requirements. The pre-app was held on February 9th and was attended by staff from Parks, Planning, Engineering, the Fire Department, and representatives from the Westlake and Oak Creek Neighborhood Association boards. At that meeting, we learned that converting these 2 existing tennis courts into 6 pickleball courts would require us to apply for a conditional use permit modification and to conduct a level 1 traffic analysis. In addition to that required traffic analysis, we have also conducted a parking study to determine the minimum parking spaces required for this proposal and to conduct a noise assessment, which is not part of land use, but is something we know is really important for this particular issue. I will be sharing the results of these studies with you tonight, and I'm going to go through them one by one because it's a lot of technical information to absorb. And we're going to start with the sound study. We hired a firm called Spenderian & Willis Acoustics and Noise Control, LLC. They are far and away the most qualified firm when it comes to assessing pickleball noise. They've been working on pickleball siting and noise abatement projects since 2010 and have worked on behalf of homeowners associations, neighborhood associations, parks departments, and pickleball clubs all across the country, including in Arizona, California, Idaho, Florida, Kentucky, Utah, Colorado, British Columbia, as well as elsewhere in Oregon. This firm has published articles offering guidance for siting pickleball courts based on their nearly 15 years of pickleball experience. They note, as shown on the screen here, that courts within 500 feet of homes should be reviewed by an acoustical engineer for feasibility. Sites within 350 feet often require some form of noise abatement, like MLV fencing. And sites within 150 feet will probably require abatement that is carefully designed by an acoustical engineer. Those recommendations might look familiar to you because they were also what we used as the basis for our site study and task force process last summer. Spenderian & Willis uses a national standard called ANSIS 12.9 to determine how they should adjust measured sound levels for what is technically referred to as the annoyance response of impulsive sounds, such as pickleball. They also use it to establish a threshold for what acceptable noise levels should be in a residential neighborhood in the absence of a local noise ordinance. They classify the sound of a pickleball hitting a paddle as a highly impulsive sound, and so they have adjusted their model results by 12 decibels accordingly to account for that impulsiveness. What this means is that if you were to go out with a basic sound meter and measure that sound at a pickleball court and say your device gave you a reading of 60 decibels, that would be reflected in this study as 72 decibels because they're adjusting it up to account for the particular frequency and impulsive nature of that sound, which is more annoying as perceived by the human ear, according to this standard. They also use the ANSI S12.9 for determining acceptable noise in a residential area. They recommend a maximum of 55 adjusted decibels for the lower levels of homes in single-family homes and 60 for the upper levels of multi-unit homes. The threshold is higher for upper levels because street noise is naturally higher at those elevations because it sort of bounces off surrounding buildings and echoes upwards. One thing that I have learned about sound, a lot of things I've learned about sound, but this in particular over the last few months, is that it's really challenging to demonstrate to people what 55 decibels sounds like, especially when you factor in frequency, pitch, distance, background noise, all of these factors, impulsiveness, that affect how we perceive noise. So I put together this chart that shows some high-level examples of what normal things that you probably know what these things sound like, what decibel levels these usually are. So you can see at the quiet end, we've got a whisper. It's about 20 decibels, not with a microphone in front of your face. A suburban area at night is around 40. Moderate rainfall, we all know that sound, that's around 50. 55, this is the threshold that they're using here for pickleball noise in a residential area. That's about as loud as a household refrigerator. It's a different type of sound, but this is the adjusted decibel level. And of course, it goes all the way up to like an ambulance siren, which is about 130 decibels. That's on the very loud end. I also wanted to share this table, which shows how we perceive a change in sound levels. So for example, if the actual measured sound level increases by 10 decibels, the human ear will perceive that as being twice as loud. The other thing we've learned is that sound is extremely subjective, and whether we perceive a sound as loud or annoying depends a lot on the individual, but this is a pretty good rule of thumb. So to establish a basis for the sound levels generated by 6 pickleball courts in this particular location, Spendiarian and Willis first modeled the sound levels without any noise mitigation. So this is just with the existing chain link fence and nothing else. They do take into account the area's topography, including the elevations of the courts and the elevations of homes and buildings nearby. They also spot checked those noise levels at 5 locations, which are numbered on the map for you. They're those little green dots, but they're a little bit hard to see. I might be able to pick them out with my pointer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Oops, I think I went too far. There we go. So as you can see on this map and in the table here, without any mitigation, all of these sound levels here are exceeding the threshold that they set, which is 55 for lower levels and 60 for upper levels. I do want to note that these are the noise levels as measured outside of buildings. It would be quieter indoors, especially with windows and doors closed, but we know that people want to be able to enjoy their yards as part of their homes, and we know that people want to be able to open their windows to let some fresh air in, so that's why we want to make sure that the levels outside of homes are acceptable. A couple of other things that I want to point out on this map. First, if you look to the west of the courts over here, you can see that the sound naturally starts to taper off as you get about 350 feet away from the courts, even without any mitigation. So that's where it changes from this sort of orangey color to yellow here. Now take a look on the other side of the courts, on the east side, and you'll see that this concrete training tower building that I've labeled on the map, this isn't where firefighters are living, but it's where they practice and do trainings. This building does a really excellent job of blocking the sound for homes on the east side of Bunich. The fire station itself, which is up here, also blocks a lot of this sound that would have otherwise traveled northeast. However, we know that the fire station includes living quarters, so we asked Spendiarian and Willis to model that building as though it were a residence. And the sound levels right outside that building facing the courts are projected at much higher levels than the other locations due to its proximity to the courts. It's about 100 feet, and that's the closest of any of the buildings. And you can see that the levels here are around 67. Just for context, OSHA requires that employers make hearing protection available to employees who are exposed to 85 decibels or greater. So we're not quite at that level, but it's definitely the most impacted of the 5 locations. So now let's take a look at this map. And this is the model results with installing noise mitigation that Spendiarian and Willis specifically designed to meet the needs of this site. And I'll talk more about what that entails in a minute. But as you can see in the right-hand column, this one here, this is the column of model results without abatement, and this is the impact that that abatement design has on the sound levels in this area. So as you can see, almost all of these spots that they spot checked are within the acceptable threshold, which again is 55 for the lower levels and 60 for the upper levels, with the exception of the fire station, which hovers around 64 for the ground floor and almost 66 for the upper level. Spendiarian and Willis actually did recommend that a separate interior architectural noise analysis be performed for this fire station building to determine whether window and door replacements or some other sort of retrofitting or upgrades could reduce the sound inside the building to acceptable levels. They do state that the sound levels outside the building are unlikely to be able to be mitigated to residential standards just due to that proximity to those courts. It's also located a little bit higher in elevation, which impacts how the sound travels to that location. This is the noise abatement plan. This was designed by Spendiarian and Willis specifically for this site, and I'll walk you through it a little bit. First, there's already a 10-foot high chain link fence surrounding these courts with the exception of a little gap that's right here where these stadium steps are. The noise abatement plan recommends filling that gap by placing the fence up on the east side of the steps. You can see it kind of jags out here. And it also recommends relocating the east entrance gate to the location that's sort of shown on the map here, so that the training tower can essentially be used to conceal any sound that would otherwise have escaped through that gap. They recommend that a vinyl fence cover, such as Acoustifence, be installed along the length of that area that's shown in green to reflect sound off the eastern wall and bounce it back towards the sports field. Because if you remember the maps we just looked at, there's a whole bunch of area there where sound can sort of naturally disperse. The nearest homes on that side are over 800 feet away, so there's plenty of space before that noise reaches homes on that side. They also recommend raising the south fence, which is the one shown in light blue here, from 10 feet to 12 feet in order to better block the sound for homes to the south. And on that fence, they also recommend installing a sound-absorbing blanket along the length of it. That way it absorbs the sound rather than reflecting it back to homes that are located on the other side and the north side of the courts. And for the north fence, which is the darker blue, they say that keeping the height at 10 feet is acceptable, but still install that noise-absorbing blanket. This is that product that they've recommended. It's called the Privacy Shield Outdoor Absorptive Soundproofing Blanket in 1-inch thickness. It comes in gray and tan in these 8-foot panels, and we would need 48 of them to cover both the north and south fences. And I've put a picture up to give you a sense of what that would look like. So what are the implications of this study on the anticipated project budget? Well, the original cost was estimated at $60,000, and that included restriping, resurfacing, new nets, filling in that fence gap. But it did assume that we would be able to reuse the Acoustifence material that we currently have installed at George Rogers. And while we would be able to reuse some of it for the east wall, we now know that we would also be required to purchase some sound absorptive material for this plan. The cost for those sound absorbing blankets is $22,415 to cover both the north and south fences. And an additional cost to replace the south fence that is 10 feet high currently with 12-foot high fence is estimated at around $21,600. The noise study also recommends that all of the fence panels be evaluated to ensure that they can withstand the additional wind load based on having covers on all of them. Conducting an architectural study of the fire station to determine if it could be retrofitted to mitigate the sound would also represent an additional cost that's not listed here. We're going to move on to the parking study now. Westlake Park currently has 151 parking spaces in total. There are 90 spaces in the west lot up here with access off of Melrose, and 61 spaces in the east lot down here with access off of Bunick. That does not include the spaces that are designated for the fire station. Anecdotally, the park's neighbors have told us that the southeast lot is often significantly busier than the west lot. This does make sense when you consider that the east lot has easier access to 2 out of the 3 ball field dugouts, as well as the basketball court, tennis court, play area, and picnic shelter. The study analyzed peak parking demand for Westlake Park's existing uses using data from the ITE Parking Generation Manual, 5th edition. They looked at 3 scenarios based on various concurrent uses of the existing sports fields, which are what drive the peak parking demand for this park overall. Those scenarios were the single use of the full-size soccer pitch, the concurrent use of the 2 smaller soccer fields, and the use of the 3 ball fields concurrently, and those are shown in the table here as scenario 1, 2, and 3. For assessing the demand that we generated by pickleball as a standalone use, there is currently no data published in the ITE manual for pickleball courts specifically. Rather than rely on parking demand rates for tennis, which are published, but it's not really an apples-to-apples comparison just due to some of the characteristics that we know of those 2 games. So instead, they conducted some research on what other cities have done to address this. Unfortunately, parking data for pickleball is extremely limited. They did find a recent study from Vancouver, BC, which found that the more popular of that city's pickleball sites generated a peak demand of 5 vehicles per court. This is higher than the peak parking demand rate listed in the ITE manual for tennis, which is 2.97 vehicles per court. So the study used that more conservative rate of 5 vehicles per court for this analysis, which gives us a peak demand of 30 vehicles total for all 6 courts. So you can see these are included in the table here. So this is our existing use soccer complex, use of 1 field, and then they've added in pickleball courts, 30 vehicles per court. Under all 3 of these scenarios, the study concluded that peak parking demand for the park with the addition of 6 pickleball courts could be accommodated with the existing on-site parking supply. To verify parking demand that's being generated by the existing uses in the park, we had our traffic engineers, consultants go out and conduct some survey counts over the last few weekends. And these are not included in your packet because we wanted to wait for more favorable weather conditions before we had them go out and do this work to make sure they were getting a sense of peak demand. The heaviest of the uses that the engineer observed occurred this past Saturday. It wasn't sunny all day, but it did clear up in the late afternoon, and around 4:15, the traffic engineer counted 78 cars total. So this is this Saturday, including 34 in the west lot and 44 in the east lot. So that does track with what we've heard from the neighbors, that oftentimes the east lot fills up faster. And this was a day that all 3 of the ball fields were in use, and there were people using the basketball courts and the tennis courts. And the engineer also noted that there was a lot of on-street parking on Melrose near one of the ball fields. So they counted 29 cars parked along Melrose Street and included those in the park and street total for 107 total cars being generated for that park. The previous 2 days were a little bit less intensive. I think things may ramp up as the weather continues to get warmer, but this gives us a pretty good sense that the counts that they looked at it from the ITE manual were at least somewhat representative. One thing I mentioned in the staff report is that we could hire the engineer to conduct a follow-up study where they go out to other pickleball courts in the kind of greater metro area and conduct some survey counts there so that we actually have better local data for what the parking demand is that's generated by a pickleball court. We just don't have a lot of other published data right now. And for the traffic impact study, the team had a similar issue finding published data for pickleball specifically. Again, they referred to the ITE Trip Generation Manual. That manual uses a rate of 4.21 trips per court for tennis courts. Of course, as I said before, we know there are some differences between those 2 games. Like pickleball is almost always played doubles, and the rate of turnover is significantly higher for pickleball. But this is the best data that was published. They did look at that same study from Vancouver, but that study actually found that Peak trip generation was only 3.8 trips per court. So for this analysis, they used the more conservative rate of published data, which is 4.21 trips per court as a proxy. And based on this rate, they found that the net addition of 4 courts, because there's 2 there already, so they would be adding a net 4, would generate 121 new daily trips for the park and 17 in the PM peak hour, which is between 4 to 6 p.m. For the analysis, they relied on information from the city's transportation system plan to evaluate the safety and operational traffic impacts of the project. Melrose, Westlake, and Fosburg, which doesn't show up super well on this slide, but are these sort of darker yellow colors here, Melrose, Fosburg, and Westlake. These are all major collectors, and what that means is that they are designated or designed to accommodate up to 10,000 daily trips. The design team referenced the transportation system plan, which reported that the current volumes are actually below 5,000 daily trips for all 3 of those roadways, meaning that 121 new trips is not going to be enough to degrade operations or result in a change of the classification for any of these roadways. They also reviewed crash rates at the intersections of Cruz with Westlake and Carmen Drive, which becomes Fosburg as it goes north, and found that there were no existing safety issues that were identified at either intersection, and that both intersections met the city's mobility and operational standards and would continue to do so even with the addition of these new daily trips generated by pickleball. Ultimately, the study concluded that converting 2 tennis courts to 6 pickleball courts would not degrade the operations or safety of any major collector roadways nearby, would not change traffic patterns on the local streets within 1/2 mile of the site, and would not result in needing to change the functional classification of any of the nearby roadways. That said, similar to what I mentioned regarding conducting survey counts for parking at other regional pickleball courts, we could do a similar activity with traffic and have the engineer go out and actually conduct some trip counts of other regional pickleball courts to obtain more relevant local data. The last thing I want to touch on is community engagement. Since we received direction to explore this option for Westlake Park in January, we've met with numerous community members to gather their input on the proposal. I'm not going to speak for them because I think many of them are here tonight and will speak to you on their own, but I will share a brief overview of where we've been and what we've heard from them. We attended meetings hosted by the Westlake Neighborhood Association and the Oak Creek Neighborhood Association, during which residents expressed concerns about the impacts of this project on neighborhood noise, parking, traffic, home values, their ability to work from home, and public safety, among other things. Those are just the most common concerns that we heard. We also hosted a neighborhood meeting on April 17th. For that meeting, we mailed a letter of invitation to all of the property owners within 300 feet of the park, as well as to the Westlake Neighborhood Association board members and all of the neighborhood association chairs of the abutting neighborhoods, which include Oak Creek, Waluga, Mountain Park, Holly Orchard, and Lake Forest. Signs with a meeting date and time and location and a QR code that linked people to the website were posted at 4 different locations on the property in both English and Mandarin, and the meeting information was posted to the project website. 101 community members attended that meeting, mostly from Westlake and Oak Creek and other nearby neighborhood associations. We did not hear any comments in support of the project at that neighborhood meeting. We've also had a comment form up on the project website since February, and while there have been some supportive comments submitted that way, the majority of those comments have been opposed or have expressed similar concerns about the project's impacts on the neighborhood. So I think we can take questions now if you'd like to. I know that was a lot of information to throw at you. Should I go back to my home slide? Thank you.
Kara. I just want to say thank you for leading this process. I have heard nothing but such positive feedback about the way that you have engaged with the community on this. I know it has not been easy. I mean, very difficult. Honestly, we've never had as many people show up for a meeting on any topic, well, that I can remember. So very good job to you for engaging with folks in such a graceful way and effective way. We just really appreciate your leadership. So thank you. Councilman, any questions? Counselor Afghan.
I'd like to echo what Mr. Mayor said, and I think the next mayor election is coming up. I will vote for you if you throw your name out.
No, thank you.
You have done an amazing job, and I don't know anybody else but you who would be able to do this job. I have some questions for you. When you were talking about the dB levels, I think I read in the documentation that the source dB level was something like 102 dB. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, so they measure the pure decibel levels. That's right on the court, and I think they said
Yes.
it was 102.9 generated by one court. If you're standing right there and your noise meter is like right where the pickleball hits the paddle.
Okay, thank you. Next question. The new entrance gate, I noticed some stairs there. So is your cost estimate include any ramp there so those who have difficulty walking, they can use the court?
It does not, but there's another entrance gate that's accessible on the other side of the court. So there's two entrances right now, and this one would be moved to a non-accessible location. The other one is on the west side, so if we're not putting any acoustical fencing on that side anyway, so it can remain where it is.
Okay, makes sense, thank you. On the parking tables you had, can you go back to that, please?
Yes, I think so. This one or the counts?
Yeah, this one.
Okay.
Scenario 3, it says ball field and pickleball at 120. And then I think a couple pages from now, I saw that currently we counted 107 cars. So if we combine all of them together, that would be something like 227 parking needs.
So what the existing counts would represent is this top line here.
Okay,
So we would be filling in 107 or 78 really if you're not, because we're talking about on-site parking with this table. So we'd be replacing this number with 78
okay.
for the on-site parking.
I'm trying to figure out if we have another activity like pickleball there, and there are people who take your dogs there, there are people who enjoy walking, are those individual spots counted in your overall calculation?
Yes, and the way that the ITE manual categorizes those is this is what they call a land use code, and it includes ball fields, but it also includes, they measure this data by saying, okay, well, here's a ball field, that's the primary driver of parking at this use, but there's also accessory uses like a small playground or walking trails or something like that. In each of these land use codes, but these are the primary drivers of parking. So the most of the cars that are parked on that side are going to be there for the soccer game. You'll also, of course, have people that drive there for walking their dog or playing on the playground or using the picnic shelter or things like that. But
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Counselor Afghan. Counselor Winland.
Mayor, I'm just kidding.
I don't know about this.
No, can you go through the process of how they come up with the sound simulation? Because we didn't have 6 courts of pickleball players at Westlake ever. So just for I know it's kind of buried in here, but just how do they replicate that sound? Because do we have noisier pickleball players or quieter pickleball players? And is that with the loud equipment versus the soft equipment?
so that's with the loud equipment, and I can explain high level what they do.
Right.
I've never used the model myself, but they take the 101.9 or 102.9. That is the sound that's measured when your sound meter is like right up close to where the pickleball hits the paddle. So they take that sound and then they put it into a computer model that looks at, okay, what's the elevation of the court surface? And what is the elevation of the noise receiving areas, the noise sensitive areas? And then they create those sound contour maps that models how that sound will disperse, taking into account topography, elevation, all of the other buildings nearby that sound might bounce off of. Like that's why you saw the, let's go back here, this sort of curve here where the training tower is, sound can't go any further this way because it's bouncing off this building. So they are modeling the way that sound disperses, and then they're using actual data from other pickleball courts that they have collected that did exist, where they measured the sound to feed into that model. Does that make sense?
Yep, okay. So essentially then, we don't have to have live players playing. They have the simulations that you feel confident is good information.
I feel very confident in their experience. They've done something like 50 of these. They're regularly witnesses in court cases. They stand by their work. Other people stand by their work. And I find that their experience is really unbiased in that they've worked for pickleball clubs just as many times as they've worked for homeowners associations. And they've done the same type of process.
Okay. And then there's kind of what I would call ambient noise level consideration. Sometimes when you're at Westlake Park, you can hear I-5, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can hear, depending upon where you live in town, you can hear the Lake Ridge band during halftime of a football game or the Lake Oswego High School game on a particular night when there's, I don't know, perfect wind conditions or whatever. I would assume that there's some noise level that's going to reach, that's just a background sort of noise. Did they talk about that would affect people that are higher elevations in the sort of going up the mountain park area?
Yeah, they do
places?
take into account sort of a general background noise level for this sort of a neighborhood. They'll look at, the neighborhood characteristics and say, okay, well, a typical neighborhood might be this loud as background noise, and that does factor in. But what they're really focusing on is that adjusted decibel level for pickleball noise. And I think the most important thing that they consider is that impulsive nature of the sound and the way that they adjust for that. So background noise is definitely a factor. And studies that they've done that I've looked at where it's been like right next to a freeway, that plays a bigger role. But in this sort of suburban neighborhood where surrounding is fairly quiet, it doesn't play as big of a role.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wendland. Councilor Boop.
Thank you very much. I say like everybody that it was great. The question I have is, we would not be here if there was not the court at George Rogers, right? And from that study, we focus on 150 feet. That was the magic number. Everybody said 150. How far are the courts from the houses in Westlake?
This house here is 149.5, I believe, just barely under 150 feet.
Okay. So it's not 150.
It's not quite 150.
So yeah, that's very important to consider. So our study will be flawed because I want us to be consistent on the job we are doing, because when we were doing this thing, we say 150 feet. So we are not at 150 feet. And the other thing that's kind of troubling to me is they say they come from 500 feet, 350, and then they say 150 feet require careful designs abatement, careful design abatement. And we are under 150 feet. So what would come like if, because, in research or any kind of thing, we have a cap. Like if it's like even in daily life, we say at 10 miles, you don't have a ticket. At 11, you have a ticket, or at 10.1. So here, yeah, I'm just saying that, you know, to see how, I'm pretty sure you're not deciding, but we should be consistent on what we are doing. That we, like the first time we do this thing, I was asking, we should do this kind of study. I didn't see this study at George Rogers. And I see it here, it's wonderful, but still we are not on the 150. How did the folks over there model? Because they're at 150 here, even them, that's 150. But they see that over there, there are houses that are, even if it's 2 inches less, it's not 150. So what's the rationale in their modeling without that measure?
So, I mean, I believe what the Spendiarian and Willis firm would advise is that 150 feet will almost always require careful mitigation. And when I say careful mitigation, I'm talking about something that's been designed by a sound engineer for a specific site to meet the needs of that specific site. Some of their guidance says, well, some locations, if it's the perfect conditions, could be as close as 100. But in this situation, what we see is we have a building that's about 100 feet away, and we can't really get it to achieve the levels that we were hoping for, the fire station. So it depends a lot on elevations in particular. Because if sound travels up, if court's really sunken down and has walls all around it that are really high to protect it, then sometimes you could get under 150 feet. But it's not, we could set a policy decision at 150 feet, but for this firm, they're simply going to be modeling what they see on the ground, and 150 feet is their rule of thumb, that usually they can make 150 feet work with appropriate sound abatement.
And in this thing, it's not 150.
In this case, it's not, it's just under. But they do believe that they can mitigate the homes that are, this number 2 here is the one that's the closest, that's about 149.5. And they do believe that they can get that within appropriate sound levels based on the elevations and with the use of sound absorbing blankets.
And if to remember, what was the sound level, even with mitigation at George Rogers?
I would have to go back to the study.
The decibel, yeah.
One moment. So they measured between 47 and 60, depending on the location. You have to kind of flip back and forth a little bit. I think the closest measurements were 58, 59, 60 decibels. That's unadjusted. So that's the other point of clarification I'll make, is that these are levels that have been adjusted by 12 decibels to account for the impulsive nature of the sound. This is what Spendiarian and Willis does with their studies, is they account for that impulsive pop, pop, pop that everyone talks about by essentially increasing what their reading is to account for that sound. And I do not believe that was done for the study at George Rogers.
So then 12 there, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 60 in the previous study would be 72 in this study. And 60 in this study is actually 48 actual sound, but they adjusted up 12.
And was there the same mitigation used there, the same as this one?
No, the George Rogers Park courts only had the MLV vinyl fencing cover, which reflects sound. For this project, they are recommending the reflective panels only on one side, because when it comes this way and it bounces off the green cover, it goes back over here to the west, where there are no homes within 800 feet. For the north and the south sides, they're recommending a new material that we haven't used before called the sound absorptive blanket, and that actually absorbs sound rather than bouncing it off.
And you think if we use it at George Rogers, it would be the same level as here?
Our acoustical engineer believes that if we design the mitigation, or if we install the mitigation exactly as designed, then these are the adjusted noise levels that you will get. at these particular locations.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
But to answer your question, we have not had this level of study or this type of study at Georgia Rutgers.
Yeah, that's what I want. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Boop. Councilor Burdick.
So I think my colleagues have answered some of my questions on some of the technical detail, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about how the courts, how much are they currently being used? How are they being used? Just kind of what's the usage going on right now?
So we haven't done actual survey data, but I can tell you anecdotally that when I went out to post some of the signs on, I think it was a Wednesday at like 4:30 p.m. on a sunny day, they were very well used. There were lots of people out there. They were all full. This is what we have heard from the neighborhood, that the courts are very well used. It's also what we've heard before we even suggested Westlake as an option. It's what we heard during the task force process and was actually the main reason why task force members did not want to put forward this site as a recommendation, because they knew that Westlake Park was really well loved by the neighborhood for the tennis courts.
Thanks, Councilor Burdick. And well, maybe just as a following on that, as a as a Park and Rec department, we haven't discussed this as any form of policy, but we took George Rogers Park. I guess those courts were kind of underutilized. The department, recognized. These courts clearly we would not define as underutilized. I mean, I have the same anecdotal experiences. Every time I go to Westlake, the courts are being, they seem very well used. What's kind of best practice within the industry in terms of balancing, new uses with existing uses?
Well, I think it's changing a little bit in regard to pickleball particularly. So best practices generally in parks and recreation is when you have underutilized facilities that can be converted to uses that are more popular. That best practice says that you analyze that and you go ahead and you move that opportunity and you do that. I think that what we found out over the last 7 to 10 years with pickleball is that there is the noise. The noise is a special factor with that. That being said, conversion of existing courts that don't generate the same noise level to pickleball, in particular, with everything that we know, have to take really special consideration into what the noise effect will be, because it does create a different environment. Best practice would be to analyze areas within a community where pickleball can be built, not converting, but specifically built because the physical condition of the park allows for setback and for sound mitigation. That's the best practice. Secondarily would be looking at underutilized facilities that also meet that criteria and can be mitigated.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of in the history here in Lake Oswego another park use that has kind of come under this same level of scrutiny?
You wouldn't let me build a motocross track or an outdoor gun range. So no, actually, in the nearly 12 years I've been here, there hasn't been a park use that's come under this amount of scrutiny.
It's unique.
It is unique, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And in the noise studies, while we set this 55, 55 is this level according to these fine folks here at this firm. And so we know things underneath that level at least are not going to harm people physically, right? But it doesn't speak to how annoying the noise may be. Is that right?
It will not physically be harmful to people's ears.
Right. But it doesn't measure how annoying it could be if we could.
That's very subjective. I don't think.
It's very subjective, right? There's no way. There's no
Very
way.
subjective. And I think in some casual conversations, Mayor, we've talked a little bit about when you have, I think Kira brought this up, when you first notice a leak, like a roof leak in your house. Mm-hmm. It can be less than that refrigerator, but as soon as you notice it, you're going to notice it every time it drops. And I think that psychosomatically, that is kind of because of the repetitiveness and the impulsiveness of pickleball, that it is a noise that after people hear it, and if it is annoying to them, they're going to hear it every time. And again, it could be 12 decibels or it could be 45. And then once you hear it and you're listening for it because it's annoyed you, I think that I would say that it's fair to say that.
I think we all know too, expectations play a big role in how we perceive sound. And the Westlake neighborhood came to being in the 80s, yeah. Really the newest big neighborhood in Lake Oswego. And this park, Westlake Park, was developed around the time, well, the same time that the neighborhood was developed. These courts have been there since the get-go, correct? So for many decades, I mean, everyone that lives in Westlake has moved in, right, with these courts, with the expectation that these courts were there and accustomed, of course, to the use that goes along with them. Okay. Counselors, any other questions? Oh, you too? Oh, they are online. Do they have any questions? Well, should we see if they're really listening?
I'm good.
Any questions, Counselor Raff, Counselor Corrigan? Counselor Corrigan? Counselor Corrigan, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I need to chime in on thanking Parks and Rec for the professional and thorough work on exploring this. I think we learned an awful lot. So my question is, just kind of looking back with regard to the neighbors at George Rogers Park. So this, if I understand correctly, the sound was not adjusted for the additional 12 decibels. So they actually would have been experiencing something twice as impactful as we thought they were. Is that a correct assumption?
I'm not a sound engineer myself, so I think there's probably some nuances there, but what Spendiarian and Willis recommends is that you adjust by 12 decibels to account for the impulsive nature of the sound. And in reading the report from the previous sound engineer who did the study for George Rogers, we did not see that same adjustment level.
Okay, all right. Then just curious, did you happen to tally the comments that were for and the comments that were against? Because you fielded so much input on this. I'm just wondering if you have a sense of that.
I could put a rough percentage to it. I think in the neighborhood meeting of the 101 attendees, 100% of the comments were opposed. In the comment form, we've probably gotten maybe 7 or 8 supportive comments. And I can't speak to all of the testimony that was emailed to the council in advance of this meeting, but that's been my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Counselor Corrigan. Okay. Counselor Raff, you good?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was talking earlier and no one ever said anything. No, I don't have any questions. Appreciate the diligent work by the staff to get this information to us. So I'm ready to move on.
Okay. Thank you both. Okay. And thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, okay, folks, we're going to move into we're looking forward to hearing from everyone. Thank you all again for being here. When I call your name, we're going to move into the public comment portion. We want to get through as many people as we can, so we have 2 minutes for your comments. There's a timer up on the table. We appreciate you paying attention to that. When you come forward, if you can just state your name for the record, you don't need to give us your address or anything like that unless you want to volunteer that. We're going to start with, and I would just one blanket. I'm sorry for mispronouncing anyone's name. I will do my best. We'll start with Barrett Ballou. Good afternoon. And on deck is Heather Thom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you here.
Hi, my name is Barrett Ballou, and I'm a sophomore at Lake Oswego High School. It's unfortunate that I had to miss a class today and track practice to speak to you today to protect my neighborhood. My second-story bedroom directly faces the proposed pickleball courts, which is the second most affected home in the sound study. This is a serious problem because the noise pollution from the courts will impact my studying and mental health. Even with the proposed sound mitigation, there will still be substantial consequences for my family and many others. If this plan moves forward, not only will I be hearing the repetitive ping, but I will also have to endure the increased volume of people behind my house from sunup until 10 p.m. every day. From my understanding, the noise problem with pickleball are very well documented. The repetitive noise is a mental health risk for our neighbors. Additionally, when the parking lot is full, which is almost every day in the summer, cars are forced to park at the street. This is problematic because this could prevent fire trucks and other emergency services from getting through. Not learning from our own history and moving the problem does not make logical sense. Not only are there residents surrounding the park, but the fire station is less than 100 feet away, which causes a huge impact on our firefighters that serve our city. Neighbors of George Rogers and other cities that have pickleball courts in residential neighborhoods have had many problems. People who live near pickleball courts have complained about their anxiety and stress due to the repetitive noise. So why would you just want to move the problem to another residential neighborhood? My parents would have never purchased our beautiful Westlake home backed up to multiple or any pickleball courts. We enjoy our backyard space as a quiet, peaceful sanctuary, and this proposal threatens to strip this away from our family and many others. City Council, our elected officials, please prioritize the health of our neighbors and children over the game. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ballou. We're glad that you came on. Okay, Heather, come on down, and then Nancy Kirk, you are on deck. Please come on forward. Good afternoon.
Hello.
We heard that you drove from Eugene.
I did.
Great. Good to have you here. Please, go ahead.
My name is Heather Tom, and I live directly across the street from Westlake Park. However, I am currently a student at the University of Oregon, and I did drive up today just to come here. The reason why I made such an effort to be here is because I truly love the Westlake courts. I've played on them almost every summer night for the last 3 years. And I know I'm not the only one who feels so passionately about the courts. The reason why my friends and I normally go in the evenings is because they're jam-packed in the day. There's people waiting for hours at a time just to get to play on them. I also know that the support extends even past this. Hearing about the community meeting where over 100 people showed up and not a single one was in support really stood out to me. These people who actually live in Westlake feel very passionately about not having it. And in some ways, it's a little bit hurtful that the community is being heard, they're voicing their opinion, but seemingly not being listened to as the project is still being pushed forward, even though the actual community is saying that they don't want it to happen. However, I do sympathize with some of the pickleball players. I fully understand that it would be harmful to not be able to play the sport you love, and I know I would feel the same way if I wasn't able to play tennis. However, destroying existing infrastructure to simply build new pickleball courts isn't the answer. Other solutions could include possibly building temporary pickleball courts, the removable nets, so that both parties could use the facilities, or looking into other locations. However, destroying the Westlake Park tennis courts is simply not a viable solution. I think that the noise complaints are also a very valid concern. I think that our community probably could learn more from George Rogers instead of simply creating the problem again and having to deal with the repercussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Thom. Okay, Nancy Kirk, please come on down. And Don Palmer, you are up after Nancy. Good afternoon.
My name is Nancy Kirk. As a city, we are doing so many good things with the arts, our outdoor spaces, our diversity education, and working hard for inclusive housing options. All this to open our arms to those who want to move here and be a part of our great community. Yet, how can we ignore those who live here now? Those of us that have lived here for decades, watched our kids go through top-rated school system, watched our children grow, enjoyed all the sports facilities, the recreation, the library, etc. and have paid for all these great amenities with our tax dollars. Pickleballers form a large part of the backbone of years of city bonds to generate needed funds. It's not cheap to invest in all the things that are a part of LO's soul. Now here we are, still paying taxes and asking for a personal return for us. Our parks are city parks, not local parks governed by those in the surrounding neighborhood. Pickleball players deserve a place to play and have shown the ability to compromise with our neighbors in order to enjoy an activity that keeps us healthy and happy for hopefully many years to come. The Westlake Pickleball Study results document you have in front of you from Parks and Rec did all the studies you asked them to do and has proven that Westlake Park is a viable location for pickleball in LO. Let's not ignore these independent professionals' analysis. Please vote to begin the process of making Westlake Park a pickleball facility so that LO will be providing equal opportunity fun for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kirk. Okay, Don Palmer. Come on down, and then Ed Wilson, you're up next after Don. Oh,
Thank you.
good afternoon, sir.
My name is Don Palmer. I live at 4744 Cambridge Court. I have been a resident of Lake Oswego for 50 years, over 50 years, and am grateful to have both lived here and worked in this community. I have been an advocate for good health during my time here. Keeping active, eating nutritious food, and being safety conscious have been my goals for decades. Also, practicing the golden rule in my daily life experiences has been a motto as well. Pickleball certainly is one way of getting exercise. However, no one wants the courts to be near their home because of the noise factor. Therefore, the golden rule weighs in, and I cannot recommend that the tennis courts be converted to pickleball courts at Westlake Park. Another motto in my life experience is that the treatment shouldn't be worse than the disease. The disease is lack of pickleball courts in Lake Oswego in 2023. And the treatment is to convert the tennis courts at Westlake Park to pickleball courts. In this case, I firmly believe that the disease, that the treatment is worse than the disease. And I want to commend the city council and the mayor for all the time they are spending to keep our community healthy and totally a place to cherish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Wilson, please come. And Michael Pay, you are up next. Hi, Chief. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Good afternoon, Mayor Buck, members of council. My name is Ed Wilson. My wife and I have lived for over 21 years at 4738 Amherst Court, which is in the Oak Creek Neighborhood Association, and I am currently the president of the Devonshire Homeowners Association. And that association is located directly north of the fire station and the pickleball court. So we believe we'll be negatively affected if these courts are converted. The neighbors in my association, my owners, they're not against pickleball or the pickleball players in any way. They just don't believe this is the appropriate place to put pickleball. We appreciate the sound study that was conducted and the traffic study. What the neighbors are really concerned about is that repetitive nature of that sound. It may be at a lower level, acceptable maybe to some on the council, but it's repetitive. Just before I came to this meeting today, there's a gentleman having a new roof put on. He's about 300 feet away from me, and just the repetitive of the staple gun. I can't imagine hearing that all day long times 6 courts. Maybe at a lower level, but it's annoying. So I'm not going to speak too much longer because I have submitted a written testimony to the council. But with respect to parking, I've raised 8 grandchildren in the park there and utilized the play structures. And while I'm there, I'm often see parents and grandparents driving there, parking there to bring their children and grandchildren out to park. I think human nature, I think we all understand that if that park is used more with pickleball, they're going to park on the east end. There may be 90 parking spots on the west side, but the majority of people, if they can, are going to park there, which may in fact take away from the ability of some of these parents and grandparents to drive there and share those with their underage children or younger children. And with that, please consider that. I attended all three of the neighborhood association meetings, and they were 100% in opposition to it, although if it was a pickleball player, they probably wouldn't have raised their hand. And just before the meeting started, I was informed that the probably unscientific survey conducted by Lake Oswego Review that of our neighbors here in the city, 83% were in opposition to moving or repositioning the courts there. So anyway, thank you for your time. This is my first time in city council since you built a new facility. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
I think it was a great job investing in a new building and not repurposing the old one.
That's good. Thanks, Chief. Okay. Mr. Pei, and then John Nobriga, you're up next. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Mike Pye, and I live on Chelsea Drive in Lake Oswego, which is about, if my geometry was right, about 500 feet from the proposed pickleball courts. You've heard a lot about the noise issue. I want to talk a little bit about parking and about traffic. My wife and I moved to Westlake 15 years ago with an 18-month-old and one in the oven. It is an idyllic neighborhood. It's quiet, it's serene. Kids are playing everywhere. My kids did. I see kids playing everywhere now, whether on the yard, in the park, and yes, on the streets as well, because there isn't a lot of traffic that goes through there. My concern that I want to address is traffic. The study that was put up by the Parks Department showed that peak parking with pickleball courts will be ranging anywhere from 92 to 120. There's 61 spots on the east side. During peak soccer season, when more than 61 spots are used, people don't go park by the Little League field. They go park on Chelsea Lane, Chelsea Drive, Avery Lane, and Gabriel Court. That's where people park. The neighborhood is an unbelievable neighborhood to walk your dog, to play with your kids, to just enjoy everything that is great about our town. When you have an additional traffic flow that the study has talked about, whether it's 92 or 120, that's still 40 to 60 more spaces than that the east side can handle. They are going to park, the traffic is going to be moving in and around a very quiet neighborhood. The study also said that peak time for traffic was in the 4 to 6 p.m. hour, which is when all of the schools let out and when all the buses let their kids out, all around Melrose Drive.
I got to ask you to wrap it up. Thank you, Mr. Pye. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, is John Nobriga? John Nobriga coming down, and then Gretchen Sabo, you're up next. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I want to first of all thank you, Mayor Buck, for pronouncing my name correctly. Oftentimes people refer to me as Noriega, and we know he's in jail, and I don't like the association, so thank you.
He did come to mind.
You did a great job, thank you, appreciate that. My wife and I have lived in Lake Oswego for a little over 23 years. We live on Mulholland Drive, which is just north of the park. I recently vacationed in Hawaii. I'm from Hawaii, so I like going back there for a vacation and seeing my family and friends. And the location that I was at was in a townhome uphill from a tennis courts and pickleball courts, about 550 feet away. And I stayed at that location for 2.5 months. And the tennis ball noise was muted at that level, but the pickleball was piercing, constant, repetitive. It was extremely disturbing. I couldn't go outside and read a book. Even the sound of the waves didn't muffle the sound. That was unpleasant. I currently live about 300 feet away. With my experience, just from January until April this year, I really believe that it will not be a place where I want to live or can live. I don't know what the people who live at 150 feet away are going to do, short of putting earmuffs on or earplugs. The sound of the pickleball that close, again, from my recent experience, will drive them crazy. I implore you, please do not locate the pickleball courts at Westlake Park. Find a place that is not in a neighborhood. Pickleball does not belong in a neighborhood. Make it a win-win situation for everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Okay. Questions coming on down, and then Shauna Roner, you are following Ms. Sabo here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's like I've seen some of you on Zoom in neighborhood meetings, but this is my first in person.
Good
So
to
if
have
my
you.
voice goes like this a little, you'll understand. I live on a court off Amberwood Circle, which meets Westlake Drive in two places. So I probably would not be directly impacted by the noise, but I'm here to support my neighbors who would likely be impacted. But I wanted to also talk about the traffic study, which seems to zero in on the number of cars, the increase in number of cars, but I don't see anywhere that talks about the speed of the traffic. I've lived in Westlake for 23 years. For 22 of those years, I have owned one or more dogs. So I walk a lot. I walk all of these streets multiple times every day. I see the traffic. The problem is that cars, even though the posted limit is 25, they're often 35 and sometimes 40. The people who live on the west side of Westlake Drive have to cross the street to get to the pedestrian path, and I've almost been hit numerous times. Other people have. There's no signage, no pedestrian signs, nothing to warn cars that people are present. So I've seen kids try to cross and have to back up. So my point is that with the increased number of cars that are estimated to be on Westlake Drive, and also Melrose, and I've just seen too much speeding. There doesn't seem to be any police presence in terms of trying to manage the speed. Cars roll through stop signs. It's kind of a mess. So I just wanted to remind you that speed of traffic is important, and it adversely affects the people who live there. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sabo. Okay, Shauna, you're coming down, and then John Self. You are after Ms. Roner here. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Shauna Roner, and I live in the Westlake neighborhood and have since 1992 and raised my family there. Westlake Park is the jewel of our neighborhood. It's always been a safe, friendly, and active park that serves its residents well. In one sentence, Westlake Park would become a regional pickleball facility, serving many players from outside the neighborhood, from outside of Lake Oswego. You are hearing today many reasons why Westlake Park is not a suitable site for pickleball. I think you are throwing good money after bad. If installed, it's just a matter of time until the Westlake neighbors have had enough and will be more vocal than George Rogers residents, and you'll be compelled to move the courts again. Number two, this is a problem that is not unique to Lake Oswego. Many cities across the nation and neighboring cities are having to dismantle them due to all the problems we are reporting on. Many neighborhoods in other cities are resorting to lawsuits. Why go there? 3, council members, knowing what you know now, ask yourselves, would I want this in my backyard? 4, cultural diversity. One public comment brought up at the last meeting reported on how this will negatively impact the Asian community. In a city honoring diversity, equity, and inclusion, you will be antithetical to that pledge. In the 31 years I lived in Westlake, there have been many city projects that have had to wait many years to come to fruition due to suitable siting and financing. A community center, a new community pool, a skateboard park, dog parks. Enlarging, updating, and possibly moving the library, this new city hall. Why should this pickleball facility project be any different? What's the rush? If there's not enough money to do it right at this point, take a breath, reevaluate, and make the best decision regarding a location that is in the best interest of everyone, even if it takes a few years. Since you are providing 3 to 4 courts at the new rec center, let that be enough for now. Reviewing comments from the Lake Oswego Pickleball page on Facebook, they suggest several nearby places for them to play. The
Ms. Rohner,
garages.
I'm sorry, you got to cut you off. Thank
Oh,
you very much.
okay.
We appreciate your
All right.
comments.
Thank you.
All right, John Self, please come on down. And Oscar Schur, you are on deck. Good afternoon,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Self.
Well, you said that, I think you remembered me from the Muni golf tournament before we closed it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We finished second, by the way. My name is John Self. My wife and I live at 4800 Hastings Drive, which is down the street. And like Gretchen, I'm here and my wife is here to support the folks and our neighbors that we have known all these many years and the new neighbors that are being totally impacted by this. We walk our dogs similarly several times a day and take advantage of our neighborhood park. It is a neighborhood park. And you probably all have seen the traffic issues when you visited us in August when we've had concerts in the park. Our neighborhood has been very accommodating for all those issues. But I wanted to bring up a couple of things. One thing about our tennis court, or our tennis courts as they are now, you know, those are lighted. So we have the possibility of a 12 or 14-hour day of this constant repetition of pickling all day long, or even into the night. In the summertime, that's just going to be unbelievable. And I'll get right to the trust too with the fire department. You know, this is a training facility. We all know that. One thing that was not brought up, and we're in touch with these guys all the time, they're a great group. They have anywhere from 3 to 4 engines, including hook and ladders, that participate at one time at the park. That's, you know, water flying everywhere. But the point is, they take up a good 30 of those spaces that we've been talking about on the parking study. They have to block a lot of things off. Now we're putting nets up, which has not been an issue with a tennis court, which, by the way, the tennis court is really attractive to our community because it's assessed by foot and bicycle traffic for the most part, right? And we do have some occasional training or classes from the area high schools and so forth that come over and take advantage of those courts. We will be seeing a lot of that this summer. I just wanted to say, really, when I think about all the things that happen over at George Rogers, you know, the bottom line is, our density is twice as much as the density at George Rogers. We have elevations that go up. That sound's going to go up. So people have addressed that today. That being said, please, on behalf of Westlake, just don't put a bow on George Rogers and give it to Westlake, because you're going to anger a lot of good people out there while you're accommodating a few.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Self.
you.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Schur. Good afternoon, and Christina Cruz, you're after Mr. Schur.
Good afternoon. I'm a resident of Lake Oswego for the past 15 years. I am a retired pulmonary and critical care doctor. I am opposed to moving one problem from George Rogers to Westlake. It's pretty simple. This city has always been a special place for me, a newcomer. As a scientist and physician, I would question whether an IRB would be required. That's Institutional Review Board, required for any scientific experiment. And you are asking for an experiment on the firefighters who will have to, even with abatement, live in an environment that could be harmful to their health. I question anyone who would say, this should be done. I also question, why does it have to be cheap? Nothing in Lake Oswego is cheap. I've heard that, you know, that this is the best solution because it's cheap. That was mentioned earlier today. And I just don't understand why my taxes are so high. That's not cheap. and I support the city. And I would even support having more taxes if that's what's necessary in order to provide for the health of this community. Lastly, I would like to question why there was a decision when it wasn't even mentioned that Westlake should be a part of the solution to the George Rogers problem. It wasn't mentioned in any of the recommendations. All neighboring cities have pickleball courts which are appropriately sited either indoors or far away from homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. All right. Ms. Cruz is coming on down, and then Michelle Barnett, you are following her.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for having us here today. I first wanted to let you know that I moved here from Denver, Colorado, outside of Cherry Creek, where pickleball is huge, giant tournaments. I lived right near Amherst Drive, where there was actual 2 pickleball courts that were converted from tennis courts, and we had to move. Our home devalued and went down in price. The Gates Tennis Community Court is just down the road, and it houses the pickleball tournaments, which brings people in from all over the region, and you cannot find parking whatsoever. Luckily, the Gates Tennis Court's far enough away from homes, but there's about, I think, 9 or 10 courts there. That's a development, and so it's a really beautiful facility, but that's not what Westlake is. This is a neighborhood. It's densely populated. I was also part of the Iron Mountain community meetings. I went to every single meeting. I was not listened to at all. Was there with my little kids trying to get a playground put in for like little children versus what we created in Iron Mountain, which is horrendous. Children do not go there. Nobody goes there. It's a completely underutilized park. Here we have Westlake. We have an overutilized park that is completely densely populated. Homes, families. We purposely left the Iron Mountain area because it wasn't as super friendly for a park area, and moved to Westlake so our kids could ride their bikes, walk to the park, play baseball, play football. My husband coaches football, and we have baseball practice and football practice there on Sunday afternoons. We're lucky we can walk there, but not everybody can, so when these pickleballers come in, they're not just bringing in themselves and 2 courts and doubling up the cars, but they're also having a wait list. So what's going to happen to those like us that want to use these tennis courts, which we used every single day last summer with our little kids? So I appreciate you listening to us. We urge you not to convert our precious tennis courts and change the neighborhood dynamic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Ms. Barnett, good afternoon. And then Doug Anderson, you're following.
As you can see, this is a very emotional issue for our neighborhood, but I still would like to try and make some comments. My name is Michelle Barnett, and I'm a resident of Westlake neighborhood for 15 years. When we were looking for a home to raise our family, we rented in Westlake first, just to fully understand and experience the character of the neighborhood, including all the noises of the park where I live very nearby, before making it our permanent home. This plan for a pickleball complex in our park is incompatible with the Lake Oswego Comprehensive Plan and will change that character of our neighborhood permanently. I've actually looked at the comprehensive plan now because I have had to dive into understanding these issues and how these decisions are made, and it's posted publicly on the website. Page 26 says that the policies are to promote compatibility between development and existing and desired neighborhood character, and to avoid negative impacts on surrounding properties, and to minimize noise impacts on surrounding properties and protect and maintain the quiet character of those areas of the community unaffected by major noise sources, as well as to involve neighborhoods and adjacent property owners in the planning and design, etc. All of the neighborhood associations have unanimously voted against this, including the Westlake Neighborhood Association, the Oak Creek Neighborhood Association, the Westlake Homeowners Association, and the Meadows Homeowners Association. I have personally attended as many meetings as I can in our neighborhood to hear the information and, where appropriate, to be able to give my input in the process that you are proceeding through. I did not observe any support for this project. This is a very serious issue. I appreciate us trying to have some humor to get through the day, but please know that this really impacts human beings in the neighborhood and in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. Okay. Mr. Anderson, good afternoon, and then Karen Godden. You're following Mr. Anderson here. Hi there.
Hello, my name is Doug Anderson, and I was a member of the LO Pickleball Task Force, and also I am a member of the Pickleball Club, and I'm a board member there. First of all, our club has compromised quite a bit. Last year, we went ahead and cut a lot of our hours. We did not start until 9. We moved that back, not the city, from 8 o'clock. We went to 9 o'clock. We did not park across the street where the neighbors were. We only parked on the side of the pickleball courts, and yet our time kept on getting, deleted more and more. And I'm all for building a new facility away from homes, and what I would like to propose is Westlake Park until we get those courts built or anything, or even George Rogers Park. Our club wants a place to play, and so do many other people.
Oh, come on, folks. Respect, folks, come on.
A few months ago, Councilman McEmboot, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, noted on the decision to play pickleball should be based on scientific information. Well, the results are in, the scientific studies for noise, traffic, parking are in, and all in support of playing pickleball at Westlake. I ask each of you to follow the science and vote to allow pickleball at Westlake. I love the enthusiasm of the Westlake community shown here to support the community. This is what we also have in the pickleball club. A lot of our members are probably already in bed. They're over 60 years old, many 70 and 80 years old, and pickleball is their main source of social interaction and exercise. And I am certain that many Westlake residents will enjoy playing pickleball. The Lake Oswego Pickleball Club offers free instructions to all on how to play. And the first that the club was made aware of any noise complaints in the neighborhood came in 2022. We did have one complaint in 2019, and let me read what the gentleman who lived across the street wrote to us, and he sent it to the city too. We live in Old Town and regularly use the tennis courts. It is unfair for your club to take over both courts. This is when we turned them into pickleball courts. One court would be okay. It is rude and disrespectful to eliminate others. We'll be taking this complaint to the city. We've had very few complaints. This noise has only been recent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay, Karen Godden, come down, and then Susie Roach Stewart. And thank you, folks, for not, it's no good to do the interruption thing, right? Okay, let's just be respectful of everyone's different perspectives. All right, Karen, good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Karen Godden, and I live in Westlake on Hastings Place. And I'm here to join the voices that you've heard from many of neighbors, friends who have lived in Westlake. My family, 2 sons, my husband, have lived in Westlake for almost 25 years. So we've seen and seen the use of the facilities ourselves by our neighbors. So many comments have already been made that I will not repeat them. I do want to thank the City Council, the mayor, for the opportunity to get public input from us. But I want to leave you with this thought. I feel that a decision to put a pickleball court, for all the reasons stated, is going to alter the lifestyle that so many of us have enjoyed. And in fact, it's very important for many of us who have lived there to be able to get out, to walk around, take our dogs, our pets out. And some of us have medical issues that will be impacted by the noise. And the fact that you're going to increase traffic and a lot of things, which will impact our ability to really enjoy our lives. And I really want you to think about that. Yes, there's numbers, there's great analysis. I do commend the meetings that I've attended, Kira's work, your work, but realize these are people. You're asking us to alter our life. And in fact, I believe for me to have a peaceful walk, to take my dog, I'm going to have to get in my car and go somewhere else and do that if, in fact, the pickleball courts come through fruition and the sound and the impact is as great as it's projected, not only here, but what we know elsewhere in other places, whether it's Hawaii or in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Godden. Okay, well, Ms. Roach Stewart comes down here, then Elizabeth Dreyfus, you're up next. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Susie Roach Stewart. I live at 13555 Streamside Drive. I've lived there for 37 years. And Streamside Drive is just up the hill from Westlake Park. Sound travels immensely, and I know because of attending the summer concerts, I don't need to go to the park, I just sit on my deck. I'm adamantly opposed to this pickleball court idea for 4 main reasons. The first one is the sound abuse. Even if it's under the threshold of the dB, the decibels that have been talked about, it's going to be an abnormal sound that people would never have moved to our neighborhood to experience on a daily basis. Let's be real. Would you guys like to live near it? Number 2, the traffic problems and the parking problems. We've talked about it already. It's not going to work out well. And it's going to pose a threat to the fire department for being able to respond quickly and easily and fastly to the problems that come up. I watched those huge trucks come out the front and out the back, and they take up a lot of time, a lot of space. And if we have clogged up city streets, there are going to be problems. Fourth, our property values are going to go down. Would you like that in your neighborhood? I don't think so. And lastly, the current purpose of the park is for the youth of Lake Oswego and the adults as well. I lived here before the park was even created, and I think it's the most lovely thing for our kids to be able to grow up playing soccer and baseball and going to the little kids' playground. It services our youth, and those kids are going to be really negatively impacted if the pickleball court goes in.
Ms. Stewart, I'm so sorry you're out of time, but thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate it. Okay, Ms. Dreyfus and then Richard Eaton. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Dreyfus, and I'm in favor of keeping it at George Rogers Park. Why not cover it completely? Certainly cheaper than moving it to Westlake. It's been there for about 6 years playing pickleball. Why now all of a sudden they're complaining? There is a rumor around that the mayor is friends with a person that lives directly across the way from George Rogers' pickleball courts, who also complained of the noise. What's wrong with reducing the hours from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.? The train goes by at 4 a.m. in the morning. Do people complain about that? Music festivals happen at Westlake Park in the evenings during the summer. Do they complain about that? You know, this is getting out of hand. And if you just use the money to cover the George Rogers, which is already there, I think that would solve a lot of problems. And then these people would have to find a different T-shirt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dreyfus. Okay. All right, Mr. Eaton. And then Bill Miller, you are next. Hi, Dick.
Hi, everybody.
feel like a lone voice in the wilderness here. I live in the Westlake neighborhood, and I'm about 4 minutes walk from the park, and I'm strongly in favor of locating pickleball in Westlake, at least temporarily, until we can have a long-term solution. What I'd like to talk about today is sound, and I'd like to talk about the sound of laughter, and the sound of people greeting each other and hugging each other, and the sound of people making plans to go to lunch afterwards, and the sound of people connecting. We've got an epidemic in this society of isolation and obesity and the lack of connection to one another. And here we are actually making a decision to not just disrupt that by closing George Rogers, but to create no opportunity for the dozens and dozens of people every day who found pickleball at George Rogers to be their primary source of connection and sociability. And so now we've returned people to their homes, and they don't have the opportunity to play together, which means that they're actually leaving our town and going to Tualatin and going to Tigard and going to Wilsonville to find play, but they don't have the same connection with one another. So I really encourage us to look for not only this solution at Westlake, and perhaps a temporary solution with temporary nets is probably the best solution, but to actually invest in long-term solution. We know that the growth of pickleball is unlike anything this country has ever experienced. And I would hazard to say that a lot of the people who are against pickleball will end up playing pickleball, despite their preference not to play it in their own neighborhood. So I'd like us to find multiple solutions. If we look at the growth of pickleball, we're going to end up needing more than 6 courts. We're going to end up needing about 24 courts within a few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Okay, Bill Miller. And after Mr. Miller, Pat Hogan. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having a special session just to address pickleball. I wanted to mention last month I was on vacation and I had an opportunity to play pickleball quite a few times. Since we've been cut out of the play at the beautiful George Rogers Park, I'd forgotten what a wonderful social game it was. People constantly rotating, playing with new players, waiting on the sidelines for their turn to play, bantering across the net, talking to each other while they're waiting, all a very social aspect that many other sports don't have. Why does this matter? Well, the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, released an advisory, I think it was just last week, addressing the national, quote, epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Social connection is as essential to humanity as food, water, and shelter, the advisory says. Dr. Murphy went on in the advisory to say, quote, given the profound consequences of loneliness and isolation, we have an opportunity and an obligation, he said, to make the same investments in addressing social connection as we made in other things like tobacco use, obesity, and addiction. He laid out some guidelines for institutions, including governments, to follow in investing in social infrastructure. The very first pillar was to address social infrastructure, and particularly to focus on the most at-risk groups. I think you're aware that pickleball is played by older people, and that group is one of the most at-risk for social isolation. So please find a place for courts so old people can thrive.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Okay, Pat Hogan, and after Pat is Kirsten Ruffer. Good afternoon, Mr. Hogan.
Good afternoon. So I'm Pat Hogan. I spoke in a recent council meeting, and just for reference, if this was just about recreation, we might be able to wait a couple years till a good or a best solution was achieved. But at this point, we have over 300 seniors who are active playing pickleball on a weekly basis deposed, with no opportunity for either physical activity or social interaction. The real effects of the council's decision to close access to any pickleball is already having an impact on the lives of many seniors. This is especially true of the oldest population, who have fewer options to maintain physical and social interaction in their lives. They're not even getting out to other communities to do it because they don't have the same opportunities that they had when pickleball was available closer in Lake Oswego at George Rogers. Thus far, making public comments has not really been proven an effective way to resolve this important issue. The Lake Oswego Pickleball Club has come up with some very creative solutions which might minimize negative effects for everybody while providing some opportunities for seniors. We would like you to take us up on an opportunity to meet with you face-to-face and have a dialogue. It doesn't seem like this particular environment really provides that. So please accept our invitation, and we hope to meet with our group, hopes to meet with you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Okay, Kirsten is coming, and then Lou Castillo, you follow Ms. Ruffer. Good afternoon.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Ruffer. I live very, very close to Westlake Park, and I'm very much in the minority here in this room, in that myself and many other friends of mine who also live very close to Westlake Park, we are all very much in favor of having pickleball at Westlake Park. While many of my friends, approximately my age, I'm 51, they were not able to be here today because we're all driving our kids around to various things, so that's why they're not here to speak. So while many people are not here today able to speak because of other commitments, please know that there's a huge population of people who are very much in favor of the pickleball courts being built and installed at Westlake Park. And please just remember, we're a community. Part of being a community is having things like pickleball and various other things available to us very close by. So please know that while it doesn't seem like it from the meetings here today, there are many people in favor of pickleball being installed at Westlake Park. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ruffer. So Castillo is coming up, and then Jason Weber, you are next. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Lou Castino. I live right across from the park and been a resident.
Oh, could you please just go?
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Let's try that.
You got it. You got it.
Much better. Want to make 2 points. This one probably appropriate. This May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and you can see by the impact the pickleball complex at George Rogers Park has had on those residents, and you can now see the impact it's already starting to have at the residents of Westlake Park. So this needs to be done right if we're going to move forward. And I'm concerned that the instructions to Kira, who by the way has done a great job, is do something quickly and cheaply, the Band-Aid approach. I've been building stuff for 40 years. That's the first sign of something is going to go wrong. One, Spendarian and Willis has come up with a system that has a 0.5 dBA noise contingency. My math tells me that's a 0.1% contingency. I assure you the beams here and the concrete floor don't have a 0.1% contingency factor. What if this goes wrong? What if it all falls apart and you got to start over? You need to start this properly, find an appropriate site, ideally an enclosed old building or someplace out in the countryside, joint venture with 2 or 3 other communities. Do this right. Don't go to the Band-Aid approach. And As all engineers, I finish on time, and thank you very much.
Thanks, I wish our engineer would finish. Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Weber, and then Nori Bates, you're next.
Afternoon. I'd just like to thank you guys. If I could vote for the city council all over again, you're doing an A+ job. I think it's important to remember that no matter what happens here today, we all get to enjoy our parks, and we know our neighbors to the north don't get to do that. So, I just think the perspective is important here. With that said, I want to repeat something that Councilor Afghan said at the January 17th vote. My house isn't situated in a place in Westlake where it's going to be affected by this, but my neighbors' houses are. And I know at the end of the day, there's no doubt in my mind pickleball is an awesome sport. I've played it. I love it. There's nothing wrong with pickleball, the sport. But we have to balance what's a recreational activity on the one hand against the quiet enjoyment of their homes. And, you guys started this with the Pledge of Allegiance. And one of the things we say in the pledge is that, we have the right to liberty. And we understood from Thomas Jefferson that there's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It might seem silly to compare pickleball to this, but the reality is when you have this annoying noise, people cannot enjoy their homes, right? That's why people have so much emotion here. It is a mental health illness. I saw how affected the people at George Rogers Park were. And so I'm just here because of my neighbors. This won't affect me personally, but I just hope that you will balance, like Councilor Afghan said, the people's health and that live in a community versus bringing a nuisance to our community. Because when we moved here, this nuisance was not here. It's not like a garbage truck coming in the city if I choose to live in the city. This is a noise that wasn't there. It's a lot like the hammer, the air gun hammer that someone mentioned. It's random. And so that's the kind of earworm that maybe some of us can ignore, but some of us, it will drive people, what happens. You've seen what happens to people. And so I just hope you can consider that when you vote. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Hi, Ms. Bates. And then Ken Slickers will be next. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nori Bates, and I live on Chelsea Drive. I'm arguably one of the closest homes to the tennis courts. I moved to Westlake a year and a half ago, specifically for the tennis courts. I actually asked my real estate agent to find me a tennis court or find me a home that was walking distance to the tennis courts because I have a son that plays tennis, and I didn't want him to be dependent on me driving him. Sorry, I'm nervous.
No, you're fine.
So I'm here in opposition of the pickleball courts. My main reason is because of noise. I work out of my home, so my average day is 2 to 3 Zoom or team calls, and I'm really, really concerned with my office facing the tennis courts that it's going to affect my work. I also, throughout the day, like to take breaks. I walk my dogs quite often. It's such a beautiful, peaceful park, and I'm concerned that I won't even be able to enjoy walking my dogs around the park if there's just constant pickleball noise. And then lastly, the main reason why I bought the house that I bought a year and a half ago, not only was it the location, but the previous owners had spent an immense amount of money on designing the backyard. So there's this beautiful rose garden, and one of my favorite things about this house is just spending time in my backyard. And again, my backyard faces the tennis courts. And I'm just very concerned that my entire lifestyle is about to change because of this decision. I've been to, I think, every council meeting since this was raised in January. I've been to all of the other neighborhood meetings. I've been heavily involved in all of this, and I can't begin to tell you how much sleep I've lost over all of this and how concerned I am about my property value, my children. I have twin 13-year-old boys who skateboard and bike just about daily around the neighborhood. And so I'm basically reiterating things that everybody else here has said today.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Yeah, we hear you. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Slickers is walking down, then Jennifer Noble, you are up next. Good afternoon, Mr. Slickers.
Mayor Buck and city councilors, good afternoon. My name is Ken Slickers. I'm chair of the Westlake Neighborhood Association. I'm here on behalf of our residents to express our united opposition against converting Westlake Park into pickleball courts. This opposition has been expressed in written comments and verbally at city council meetings and meetings of Parks and Recreation. Unanimous opposition was voiced at the April 17th Parks meeting and again at the Westlake annual meeting on May 1st. Unanimous opposition was also voted at the Westlake and the Meadows HOA, which together make up 95% of the single-family residences in our neighborhood. The health and social benefits of pickleball are not being debated, but they are not unique to that sport. And while we applaud the city for providing a wide variety of recreation activities, not every sport can be immediately accommodated, and particularly one where neighbors will experience significant negative impacts. In our opinion, pickleball is a sport best played indoors or at outdoor locations sufficiently removed from residential areas. We therefore urge the city to discontinue plans to introduce pickleball to Westlake Park and to instead follow the recommendations of your own pickleball task force at a time when sufficient funds become available to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slicker. Hi, Ms. Noble.
Hi.
Following you is Mark Warman.
Great.
Good afternoon.
My name's Jennifer Noble. I have lived in Westlake for over 25 years, and I have been a Realtor for 27 years and have specialized in that neighborhood the whole time. I thought about just winging this because this, for me, answer is so simple, but I want to make sure I cover all my points. I don't think we need data and engineered sound studies to solve this. It's as simple as, is this Lake Oswego? Is this a city that has a reputation for community, that has a reputation for quality of life, that has a reputation for safety? All of the things that people value so highly here are threatened for the neighbors of Westlake Park. But I'm really here to focus on property values. I'm 100% confident that people's home values will decrease by a substantial amount. Yes, I could try to create a spreadsheet or find a study that corroborates my analysis, but it is all subjective. And does it really matter? If it affects even one homeowner's value, that should be enough. I personally play both pickleball and tennis, but this isn't about that. We're talking about most people's largest asset and investment, something that they have worked hard for and want to protect. I searched online for cases involving lawsuits regarding pickleball noise. There were many that stated pitting neighbor against neighbor. Has the city considered that neighbors could possibly sue if their values are affected? To put pickleball and the increased traffic and noise above people's mental health and property values. To the residents of Lake Oswego, it's just not who we are. We can do better.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Noble. All right, Mr. Warman's coming down, and then John Devlin, you were next.
Mark Woolman, I am the co-president of the Lake Oswego Pickleball Club, and I'm a retired professor of ethics and political philosophy. Good governance looks to the welfare of its community. To that end, if there's conflict between the communities, it's essential that when compromise is meted out, that there is loss and gain on both sides and hopefully in equal proportion. No such compromise was proposed for George Rogers, and that ultimately destroyed the pickleball community in Lake Oswego. Why wasn't it possible to negotiate a compromise? At one point, I think the council suggests that the courts would remain open and the Parks and Rec would look for another venue. I believe the vote was unanimous. When compromise is not reached by the governing body, historically, the implications can be devastating. Time does not allow me to elaborate on this fact, but you probably love the lecture. Hopefully, and now looking at the venue at Westlake, the pickleball community is here trusting our governmental body to restore our pickleball community. The pickleball community is ready and open to compromise, and we hope that Westlake would be too. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Warman. All right, Mr. Devlin, and then Emily James. You are after John here. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon. My name is John Devlin. I live very close to the park in Westlake. I'm I just want to make a couple points about the noise study before you all vote, just so things are very clear for your decision. That provided data for you about maximum levels and tolerance. I want to talk in plain English about what it says. Even with the proposed abatement, the sound will be audible inside the fire station with the windows closed. No dispute about that. Even with the proposed abatement, the closest homes will experience a level of sound that's really right on the line with those estimates. The line is 55, an estimate is 54.5. The study says pickleball paddle impacts greater than the readings on the table, that 55, are commonly audible inside homes. So they're right on the line, and that 54.5, that thing that seems very precise, is an average. So what a sound engineer told me is it's like if you strike a bell. First there's a loud noise, and then it kind of tapers off. If you take an average of that, it might be 54.5, but what about the pop at the beginning? A sound engineer told me after looking at the study, there will be audible pops inside the nearby homes and audible shouts. Also, the way the mitigation works, the north, south, and east sides will be blocked off. The noise will literally be funneled to the west, and I encourage you to look at that map, the photo. Ball fields, basketball court, children's playground will be flooded with very high levels of pickleball noise according to the study, and that sound will emanate out across the neighborhood. There's no dispute that the pickleball noise will be audible throughout the entire neighborhood. And the study doesn't even try to quantify how far that noise is going to go. It's going to go up Peters, it's going to go to the south. This park is surrounded by homes. So I just want you to understand all that. I don't think the staff put it in quite plain English like that. That's the circumstance and the consequence of your decision if you vote to go forward with this. The other thing I just wanted to mention is on the parking study, on an anecdotal thing, 20 cars on the street one time, 29 cars on the street the other time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Devlin. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Ms. James, and then David Wesnakis.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emily James, and I live in one of the two closest houses to the tennis courts at Westlake Park. We love our neighborhood, and we love hearing people have fun, but the noise of pickleball is categorically different than of the kids playing in the park. Because of my proximity to the park and the fact that I have two small children, I'm extremely concerned about this proposal for many reasons, but my primary concern is noise. During the daytime, kids are supposed to be doing their homework, reading, relaxing, and playing, and they're also supposed to go to bed at a reasonable time. And I know that just from observing the tennis courts, people play at night far past bedtime. Recently, 2 people showed up to play pickleball. The noise was audible in my neighbor's kids' rooms, and it disrupted her youngest child's nap, and that was only with 2 people playing. So imagine what it would be like with pickleball courts at capacity. I'm especially concerned because my daughter has autism. I have not testified about this previously in order to protect her privacy, but I have her blessing to say this today because she knows just how hard it would be for her should this proposal go through. She's brave and she is determined and And like many other people with autism, she's extremely sensitive to sounds and noise. Putting pickleball courts 150 feet outside of her bedroom window would absolutely destroy her ability to enjoy life in her own home. And from what we've learned about pickleball's sound and pitch, has made CNN headlines for bothering people across the nation. So frankly, it could destroy the ability for all of us who live nearby to enjoy life in our own home. While I sympathize with people who want to have pickleball courts, it's completely unacceptable to put them in a neighborhood at the expense of the residents' well-being, especially children. And while pickleball players have many other options for places to play pickleball, we don't have the luxury of options when it comes for places to put our kids down for naps. It's not someone's right to have free pickleball, but I believe it is someone's right to protect the quality of the life lived in their own home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. James. Is David Wesnakis here? Is he here? Oh, here he comes. You'll be our last commenter, Mr. Wesnakis. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us here today. I just wanted to say that I'm not against pickleball. I'm not against exercise. I'm not against social interaction. But I am against converting the 2 tennis courts to 6 pickleball courts in a complex at the park across the street from where I live. I think that you've heard a number of comments, both from the pickleball players and those of us that live close to Westlake Park. The question is, as you're making your decision, how are you going to determine what is the impact on the taxpayers and the voters per the decision you make? You've heard that and you know that this is an issue across the country. Most everybody is in agreement that pickleball complexes, pickleball courts, should not be located in neighborhoods. Therefore, you decided that was the case at George Rogers Park. And so you closed the pickleball there, asked Parks and Recreation, which has done their job, to investigate moving it to Westlake Park. And in fact, are you going to make the same decision again? Did you not learn from previous decisions that in fact to put this complex in a neighborhood park with so many houses, and there's more houses directly close to the proposed pickleball courts at Westlake than there were at George Rogers? A number of sound engineers say that within 350 feet, you need full abatement to minimize and mitigate the sound. There's 26 homes in Westlake within 350 feet, only 16 in George Rogers. Plus, you have the city's most busiest fire department. And why consider tormenting the staff at that fire department with pickleball noise when the acoustic engineer has said you can't really abate the noise inside the house? And do you want to spend more money trying to take a look at, well, how much it's going to cost for windows and doors?
I'm
And
so
maybe.
sorry, Mr. Wozniak.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. We appreciate that. I'm sorry for the folks we couldn't get to. We've been sitting down for a couple hours, so let's take a 10-minute recess. We'll come back. We're back in order. Okay, time to move into the council discussion. I'll get things started here with a motion. I'm going to move to direct the staff to cancel work on the project to convert the tennis courts at Westlake Park to pickleball courts, and direct the staff to continue seeking pickleball use in Lake Oswego through the comprehensive engagement as part of Parks Plan 2040.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Councilor Afkin. Kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've taken 2.5 pages of notes, and I would like to highlight the stuff that I think are important for us to consider. First of all, 10 dB means twice as loud. So if we go from 50 dB to 60 dB, the level of noise is twice as loud. Councilor Mahboub, you asked about George Rogers Park. George Rogers Park was at 47 feet. And Westlake, I went over there and I measured the window from the fence is 147 feet. Compromise does not mean we let people get hurt. So if we agree that this noise level and repetitive part of it hurts people, there's no compromise for me. I have a lot of respect for the pickleball club leaders. Doug, Antonio, Mark, and Diana. Every time we have talked before I was elected, you were all respectful and focused on the problem and how we solve it. It never got personal, or you never started any rumors. Thank you for being respectful. I want to talk to Westlake neighborhood now. You've accused us of moving the problem from one place to another. That is not true. When George Rogers Park was converted, that conversion never got through a formal process. At that time, nobody knew what the problems were. In January, when we voted, I know I voted for a feasibility study, a public process where we would understand what we're up against. So there has never been a decision to move one problem from one side of the city to another side. So I wanted to be clear on that because, one, I thank you for your public comments, participating in this process, because this is the process we are supposed to go through. Now is the decision time. I want to thank those Westlake neighbors who are pro pickleballs, who came forward and said what they needed to say. Thank you. And I also want to thank the pickleball clubbers who came, the leaders who came and talked with respect. Councilor John Wetland and I talked about this topic. When we closed George Rogers Park, it broke up a community, pickleball community, and that hurt them. That is not Lake Oswego. We don't hurt people. When we found out that the residences are being hurt at George Rogers Park, we closed it because That's Lake Oswego. We prevent people from getting hurt. Many are in support of pickleball, but a whole lot of people are not in support of hurting people. There are subjective reasons that I wrote down that I heard from you and the report. Noise level, whether it's 55 or 60 or the average or not, it is going to be a repetitive sound. Real estate impact, whether it's $100,000 or 10% or not, there is going to be an impact to the real estate cost. Parking is going to be impacted. We do have a city ordinance for dogs and dogs barking and disturbing noise. Is pickleball noise a disturbing noise? We can argue about whether Clackamas County or DEQ or EPA, what guideline we use. But at the end of the day, compromise does not mean we hurt people only certain number of hours. There are objective reasons that I believe we have to consider. I'm not your city council protecting a tennis court because you love your tennis court. But every time I come to this meeting, we stand here and we look at the flag and we say, justice for all. Mental health is a problem. And I'm not going to be able to look at the mother who has an infant, who needs to take care of that baby during the day, and say your mental health is not part of justice for all. When we have an existing kid who lives 147 feet from the court and has autism, I'm going to protect that person. When we have registered nurses who work at night and rest during the day, it's a mental health that I'm going to focus on. When we have students who are going to be studying during the weekends and evenings, I'm going to protect them from being hurt on their mental health. I took an oath, Mr. Mayor, in front of you here, that I would uphold the Lake Oswego codes. Lake Oswego didn't become Lake Oswego just because it did. Lake Oswego became Lake Oswego because there is a comprehensive plan that we must follow. And if we cannot follow it, like cutting trees, which I have a lot of respect for Councilor Mahboub excusing himself, saying that this code doesn't make sense, comprehensive plan is in place, and that's something we have to follow. And it says, promote compatibility between development and existing and desired neighborhood characters. Avoid negative impact on surrounding properties. Minimize noise impact on surrounding properties and protect ... Involve neighborhoods and adjacent property owners in the planning and design of parks ... to mitigate impacts of intense use such as traffic, parking, bright light, and noise on residential neighborhoods. Converting a neighborhood park to a sport compound does not meet our comprehensive plan, does not support mental health, and we have to make sure that our residences are not hurt. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Afghan. Counselor Windland.
Do you want to go ahead? I think you.
Yeah.
You're not going. Oh. Well, I had the pleasure of serving on our Park Advisory Board when this subject came up as the liaison to council. So I've been dealing with this subject matter for a long time. And throughout this whole process, many times I said, stick with the process. We have a good process in Lake Oswego, and something that I've learned in my public life, being on the school board and then on city council, is that we need to have engaged community advocacy for their position. And I want to tell you that the level of advocacy from both the pickleball community and from the neighborhoods, Westlake and Old Town neighborhood, has been very professional. It's been heartfelt. It's been respectful. And I have to say, it is a very high level of academic integrity. Mayor just said that West Lynn had a meeting, was it last night? And people were so unruly, they had to call the meeting and stop it. Not over pickleball. It was over housing. But my point is that we're a respectful community, and I know many of you with the t-shirts on and many of you without the t-shirts on, and you guys are all, I think, have faith in our community and want to live here because we've done so many things right. So we need to get this right. And I agree with I call him my brother from another mother, Counselor Afghan, on that we do have to be sensitive to the mental health and to the ability for everyone. And I think both sides are right in their positions. We need to have a place for the pickleball community to play, that we need to. We also have to have neighborhood harmony and maintain a semblance of community within the neighborhood. And I will say that after going through this whole process, many people have come and passionately made their arguments, and I still feel like everyone is correct in their positions. The number of seniors that we have involved in the pickleball community, which represents a big chunk of Lake Oswego, this is their sport. This was their activity. This was their social network, and we shut it down. Regardless of whether we did it right or wrong, they just don't have a community anymore to play, and I feel badly about that. I also think Jennifer Noble I've served with her on some school board stuff and school district things. I think she said it right, where what are we, Lake Oswego? We need to solve problems correctly and diligently and do it in the right way. And so I just look at this as being, first, sorry that we put Westlake through this process. But I have to tell you, you really organized quick, and I'm very proud of you. You were able to come together, and we're going to have all your names, so if we have another big issue in Lake Oswego, like tolling, we're going to get you organized because you're very passionate. But I do want to say that in the bigger picture of things, we need to fix this. We need to figure out something, and we need to do it as quickly as we can. In the same vein of that, and I've said this publicly to the pickleball community, there's been a lot of organizations that have been on the list for 20 years that are just now getting fruition. When I started on the school board, I don't know, I think it was almost 15 years ago, the pool was a big issue, and our kids in the high school level and the primary grades and junior high and even adult swimmers didn't have a nice pool to swim in. In fact, it was starting to fall apart so much that we had to shut it down a couple times because of it wasn't in good shape. And I say that because it took us a long time to get this pool built in Lake Oswego for the future generations. And I'm hoping that it's not, well, as long as I'm on council, I really will put it a high priority, and I don't want it to be a 15-year process, but we will get and figure out pickleball locations, and we'll figure out how to do it. And we need to be committed to that as a council. So I'm willing to meet face-to-face with the pickleball community, hear their ideas, figure out ways how we can do it. But at this point, I would be supporting the motion on the floor. And I will say, let's come together as a community and help solve this problem. And this not in my backyard syndrome that we sometimes have has just got to stop, okay? I hear about traffic problems everywhere in Lake Oswego. I hear about speeding problems everywhere in Lake Oswego. I hear about a lot of the issues that were brought up all over in Lake Oswego. So let's be problem solvers. Let's figure it out to do this as a community. Let's do it together. My biggest takeaway from this is that I appreciate our community even more and more by going through a process like this to get people so respectful to figure out how to solve problems. And that's, I think, part of our secret sauce of our community. So
Secret sauce.
that's my secret sauce. Yep, it's the people that live here is the secret sauce.
Thank you, Councilor Windledge. Councilor Mbu, please. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for our community members. I'm very proud of what you're doing. This is what democracy is. I remember in January when I voted to leave the court in George Rogers. If you go to the video, I said very clearly that moving this thing to Westlake, they won't accept it. And I think that's what happened. I mean, we like it or not, we move a problem from a neighborhood to another, it won't happen. That's what happened. That's like the objectivity of the debate is George Rogers refused, we say Westlake, they mobilize, and I'm proud of your mobilization, that's it. And the other reason I would not even vote to leave it there is the magic number was 150 feet. The engineers say, they were saying 149. I take the engineer's measure, 147, so it's not 150. So we cannot move the court there because we were working on number 150. That's one thing. The second thing, I think we have to be respectful. No one is hurting anyone here. We all were elected by you because you believe when we came that we were good-hearted people with values, and our values are clear. We are a member of this community. We're not gonna hurt anyone. We have our belief that we express. So saying that someone take this to hurt people, it's not true at all. I felt very touched in my sensibility of an educator when Miss James said, talk about her kid. I work with children. Actually, I wake up with children and I go to work with children. That's my life. I just, even to expand the community, I just bought a building yesterday to have an early childhood education. So when you talk about autism, what hurt kids, I live it every day. There are some children, even if the room is loud, no one will see that and say they're doing it. Like we have to leave the politics and all the drama about on the dais. And I, Miss James, I am sorry, and I know what you are going through, but also you have a gem, because autism is not, it's for those who don't understand. They're the people who will save the world. They're that thing. They're differently able. They're not like us. They're different from us, but it doesn't mean we are the normal. Maybe we are the abnormal. So when people talk, and yeah, we can see it even in our way of talking to each other in this community, and beyond. Everything is binary. It's us against them. In America, you are Republican or Democrat. I don't function like that. I am an American, and I am proud to be an American, and I will only defend what I believe is good for our community. And I'm calling in my friend, who is an ethics professor, it's very interesting because I live in an Anglo-Saxon community. I'm not from that culture. In the Anglo-Saxon community, in ethics, you go John Stuart Mill, and that's Mr. Mark. You are an ethics professor. John Stuart Mill should be a reference in this matter, the greater good, but I am not. I am more a Kantian. And someone said it about Immanuel Kant when they talk about the golden rule. The only fact that someone was hurt should make us say, oh, guys, let's look at the project. I don't go on a big number because a big number wants this or that. I see what is ethically normal. And in this matter, what is ethically normal, we move from a community that doesn't like that. Why would, in your culture, you say, what is source? You talk about source. What is source for the gander? What is it? What is source for the goose is source for the gander. That's what you're saying. So for me, those are reasons, yes, to say that. And I support sport. I play Westlake Sunday. I played there. I have already 2 games there. And by the way, I had a hat trick even the last time I played there. So I defend all these communities and everything, but I do it with coherence and with what I was in January. That's the same reason why I was asking you guys, let's call science. We didn't do the same thing at George Rogers. We don't know. Even if people say we multiply decibel by 2, that's not science. That's not true. There's nothing that show it. But what was important is we went from term of reference. The terms of reference at 150. That's what everybody was talking about. In Westlake, it's not 150. So that's why I'm coming back to that. And for me, when a community is divided over the development of something like pickleball, what is important is to approach the situation with empathy. We've seen it, empathy, with understanding and a willingness to work towards a compromise. We met with the school board. I asked them, why can you please help us find in your court that are far away from houses if our pickleball community can play there? Because I knew what was coming on this thing. It's very clear. And this is not because of your number. It's about fairness. We cannot live there and go there. So for me, it's just important. It's not fair to not play pickleball. We just cannot destroy the sport. But the truth also is, after George Rogers, after Westlake, anywhere we go, the same thing will happen. The Pilkington, it's a court that's across from a living facility. If my parents lived there, I would come and say, no one is going to put the courts there. So our only way out is to find a place that is far away from homes or that is an interior facility where people can play and go. That's the truth. Let's face it, because anywhere, it won't work. We have to be realistic and stop wasting our time of saying that. And I agree with the president that we need to talk. I am open, like we met the last time, our friend from the LOSD, we should meet with you, the community of pickleball, and we can find solution. We have to talk. We have to be creative. It's a part of being here, creative. What can we do? maybe something can emerge from that discussion, and it should be sooner rather than later. So we can move on and just like not kill this thing and say it's not gonna happen. Like my brother said, you know, we are building now, finally we will build the skate park. Yes, so, you know, I just, yeah, we will, 98%. And it was a long time coming. We shut it down from Pilkington. People were not happy, but it's here. We are shutting down pickleball, but we will build a pickleball, but we have to talk and discuss about it. That's what I wanted to say. I'm very proud to live in this community. It's a community engaged citizenship. Let's keep doing it like this, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Councilor.
yeah, thank you.
Councilor Raff, Councilor Corrigan? Councilor Raff. Okay.
Let me lower my hand first. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, it's obvious that from the data presented by the Parks Board that Westlake is not the ideal situation. But I also want to echo what Ms. Sen and John also mentioned, which is I do have to say that we, at the very beginning of this, several of us said that we were going to look into the possibility of Westlake, not move it to Westlake. This was a feasibility study. And like my man Hat Trick Masen said, we knew that this wasn't going to work at Westlake because it wasn't working at George Rogers. So, but purely from the data, it looks like it's not going to work. I don't think that if I had to turn back time, I think that we should have, as a council, had the courage to keep it at George Rogers. I think that was the best option we had. However, that's not an option right now either. What I will say is I do strongly believe that there is a solution in Lake Oswego to have pickleball. And I look forward to continuing this work as a team, inclusive of both those that want pickleball in Lake Oswego and those that don't, to come together around a table and figure out what that best option is. My belief and what I will stand by is pickleball will be in Lake Oswego. And I think there are options that we need to have. What I do have to say, the last bit, and I was reluctant to mention this, is 95% of those in favor or against pickleball were great advocates for their cause. What I will say to the 5% that used hyperbole, threatening language, threatening other council members, that's not adult behavior. So I have to say that most people behaved very well during this process, but I have to call out those that did not act in a very well-mannered area, and that I have to stand up for my brother, Ali Afghan. The accusations against him that people levied, I didn't think was fair. And that I would encourage all of you who have a point to make. Every 4 years every 4 years, there's elections for city council. So sign up and run if you have a problem with the way things are done. It's not easy, and it's not easy for $180 a month. So, so we don't do this because we're making money. We don't do that. We do this because we care. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Raff. Councilor Corrigan, please go ahead.
So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who put the mental and emotional effort in to engage in this process. I know it was difficult and it was uncomfortable, but I think that that's how the process works. And we do need to rely on the process that's brought us to where we are today. I echo a lot of the sentiments that were said by fellow councilors. But I think I'd also like to add that quality of life means that we have peaceful, tranquil neighborhoods. We prioritize that in Lake Oswego. And I don't think that should change as we move forward. We do have to prioritize our neighborhoods. They come first. Our parks and recs offerings are amenities that are offered as life enhancements. And we're really committed to that. And I think we should continue to seek a suitable pickleball site. I don't know what that looks like, but I am committed to it. It's a worthwhile sport. It just has to be in the right place. And we've had a lot of comments about our comprehensive plan. We have to always act in accordance with our comprehensive plan. It's brought us to where we are, and we need to hew to it. So I do support the motion on the floor, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Councilor Corrigan. Councilor Burdick.
I'd like to thank all my fellow counselors and just kind of echo what you said, especially Councilor Corrigan. I really stand behind everything you just said. And I'd like to thank especially the students who came and spoke, driving up from Eugene. That's not easy. I'm not sure if you're in the midst of probably going on to midterms right now. So thank you for taking that time and also being part of this process and your government and making sure your voice is heard. And that's also for everyone. Really appreciate it. To Councilor Wendland's point, that's one thing that I think makes our city very special is the community engagement and involvement. And I'd like to say that just because you might not always get exactly what you've asked for, it doesn't mean that you're not heard. I think this is a very, this is a time that's an example of that. Not everyone's gonna get what they have asked for, but it doesn't mean that you haven't been heard. Through this process, we've learned that there are no quick fixes to pickleball. We've tried that. We've tried to do that. We've tried to make it work, and unfortunately, it just hasn't. It's a great sport, it's a great activity, but it's not a great neighborhood activity, and especially in our neighborhood parks. And I think we want to make sure that we don't discount the social benefits of it. I think that's one of the greatest advantages of pickleball is that social connection that it creates. And that's why I think it's so important that we really start thinking about this and get it into our, not just our long-term planning, but I don't want to say long-term and think, oh, well, they're putting it off. That's not what I mean when I say long-term. But we need to get it into our planning that it becomes very important. This is a tricky sport because of the noise. We can't just put it anywhere. And so we need to make sure that we're really thoughtful so it's something that can really be embraced by everybody, and people who maybe in the past haven't participated will want to participate in it, and that we can bring the community together. So I want to make sure that we continue thinking about it, we continue brainstorming, that we get it on into our comprehensive plan, that we really strive to get pickleball and get it in the right location so it can have even a greater impact on members of our community. Because it is important, just as important as our neighborhood tranquility and making sure that our neighborhoods and everyone can go to their homes and kind of have that oasis. So I just want to thank everyone again for coming, for being part of this process. I think when we brought up Westlake, it was not that we knew that this was a solution, but it was like, let's go through the process and understand what the feasibility is, because to Councilor Afghan's point, that really didn't happen at George Rogers. It was just kind of plopped there, and we didn't go through to truly understand everything. I think we've all learned a lot more about pickleball, so that moving forward, determining where it should go and how it's looked, we know so much more than we've ever known. So we can really leverage that in the future.
Yeah, more than we ever wanted to know.
Right.
More than we ever wanted to know. Yeah, no, thank you everyone for your comments. To the pickleball community, I mean, you have been great advocates for yourselves, and we want the message to be clear that we are not giving up on pickleball in Lake Oswego. Not by a long stretch. We have gone through this process because we heard all of you. In fact, you had me rather convinced that, and you all, most of you in this room here will probably think I'm a complete nut job, but I was I really thought that maybe folks in Westlake would like pickleball. You have been great advocates. You said this is so popular, everyone's going to love it. And I thought, well, maybe there's a chance. I don't know. But clearly through this engagement, process, we have learned that while there are some, I mean, it's not unanimous, there may be some folks supportive, it's clear that there is not support in the neighborhoods. And what you have gone through, while stressful, and like I said at the beginning of the meeting, no one has asked for this, but by participating in this process, you've really helped validate a lot of the concerns we heard from the neighbors at Old Town, who before you all got engaged in the process, they were told that they were just some crazy people who lived across from the park, and it was just them. It was just them. They were just being NIMBYs, and that it was unique. They have some unique sensitivity. But now seeing this, we know that's not the case, okay? That it's not just unique to Old Town. It's not just unique to Westlake, that neighbors, by and large, in Lake Oswego do not want pickleball in the parks close to the homes. And so through your engagement, you've made that abundantly clear. And I think that folks, you know, in Old Town who are watching this will feel really validated in their concerns, because I think in the process before that, that really wasn't the case. You know, I know I've heard from your neighborhood that they've never had more engagement, you know, and why must it be over such a contentious thing? But of course, this is human nature. We struggle year after year in the business of the city to get neighbors engaged. So now that you all have gotten together, I really hope in the future it will not just be over these, you know, perceived threats to the neighborhood, but also all the opportunities we have as a community, because it really is important to get to know your neighbors. The city is doing lots of good work with neighborhood associations, so I hope we take this as a chance to boost up that engagement that that you're doing and staying engaged in a lot of the opportunities we have working hand in hand in LO. So it's definitely clear from the comments a lot of you made. Now is the time to really take a step back. Since at the beginning, we were trying to be responsive to an urgent need. When there was, I mean, folks were very, very, very concerned about the pickleball use at George Rogers closing down. And unfortunately, in the city, you know, doing things cheaply and quickly is, you know, definitely in general not the best way to go about it. But in this case, there was a desire demonstrated to see us replace those courts as quickly as possible, and we went down that path. But I think this has been a process that's helped validate a lot of these concerns. So,
and Mayor, can I make one other comment? Just so everyone knows, we don't have unlimited money. In fact, we have so many projects that people want in Lake Oswego that we can't afford. So when we get the comments of, well, just use the money and build a court somewhere that's not around where I live, right. We don't have that pot of money, because you also tell us that you want streets that don't have potholes, and you want this and that and all kinds of things. And so my point being is that we took the fiduciary responsibility seriously, and while we didn't just want to plop it over in Westlake just for money, right, the process that we went through was very engaging. But the bigger picture is that there are some options out there. They just cost a lot of money, and we don't have the money right now. So I just
That's
just
right.
to put that into context.
That's right. And so we have Parks Plan 2040, and this is, again, another opportunity that folks can engage on is, you know, we are working now off of Parks Plan 2025. And now it's time to update that plan into Parks Plan 2040. So we hope that you'll be engaged in that long-term comprehensive process, really help set the direction for all of our parks for the years to come. Councilor Afghan, did you have a follow-up?
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to recognize the mother who has a special needs child who came and sat in front of us and publicly explained what she's going through. I wanted to say that I can't imagine the terror and the anxiety you were going through for what could happen and how you were feeling about your precious child. We know from everything that has happened in other locations that pickleball divide communities, and we're right there. I want us to change that, and I want us to prove that pickleball can actually galvanize communities. So we've learned a lot of lessons, and pickleball people who sat here, they extended an invitation to us to to meet with them directly. This doesn't mean I am going to accept hurting people, but this means I want to talk with you, just like my brother, Councilor Wetland said. We want to enable this, but at nobody's expense. So I'm willing to team up with any other councilor who wants to partner up and make this move forward.
Great.
Could you also repeat the motion so I'm clear what I'm voting on?
Yes. Yes, okay. So the motion is to move to direct staff to cancel work on the project to convert the tennis courts at Westlake Park to pickleball courts and to continue seeking pickleball use in Lake Oswego through the comprehensive engagement as part of Parks Plan 2040. All right, declare. Good.
No, I just wanted to say something that I missed about the person who talked about Mr. Mayor's friendship with someone made him vote for that. It's not true. The mayor is my best friend, and we vote differently on that matter. So it's a testimony that we are not following friends. I have many friends at Westlake in the front here. Yeah, many, and it's not for that I'm voting against, or we are here for the community. We, like my brother Aaron said, we have to respect us. Folks, you know, we are people. The mayor is a personality that's very respected in the region, like here. So a matter like this, it's not his being friend with John or Joe or someone that will. I just wanted to say that it's not fair, folks. You know, we are not paid, you know, to do this work. We love this community. That's why we are doing it. And, you know, please forgive our shortcomings. We'll vote things that you won't like. This is how it is. And we'll vote things you like, and this is how it is. Today, not everybody is going to be happy living here, but it's not our fault. It's how things work. Mm-hmm. So thank you, and I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Councilor Boop. Yeah. In our small community, we are all friends. Yeah. We're good. Okay. All right. Let's, Ms. Vermillion, let's call the roll on the vote, please.
Mayor Buck,
Yes.
Councilor Boop,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Raff,
Yes.
Afghan,
Yes.
Corrigan,
Yes.
I read her lips. She said yes.
and Councilor Wendland.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again, everyone. We're real quick. We have one just a short item of business.
I would like to
approval of
move
our
to
meeting
approve the minutes as written.
All right. Is there a second? These are our meeting minutes from January 17th, March 7th, and April 4th. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, that motion passes 7-0. Everyone, thank you again for coming. We appreciate your advocacy and respect today. We are adjourned.
Oh, we are adjourned.